Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today for Cyber Circuits from Project Spectrum. I'm Rick with the Project Spectrum Outreach team, and I'm happy to host today. And I will introduce my guest in just a moment, Mr. Greg Summers. But before I do all of that, I just want to say again, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us today. A couple of housekeeping items. All of your cameras are off and all of your microphones are muted. We do that for a specific reason because as much as we love to hear the, occasional dog barking or child screaming in the background, we tend to try to take those things down a notch. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type that question into the chat. We will get to questions as time permits toward the end, or we might even break in if there's something that's really relevant and we want to try to toss it in there because, again, this is going to be a chat. So we want to make sure that we give everyone a chance to ask questions and be heard. A couple of other things, your name as it is listed, please make sure that that is okay. Please understand that other people can see that, and it is going to be part of the official transcript. And because Maryland is that two-party consent state, because Maryland has to have all kinds of strange rules and regulations, and I'm just not going to go into that right now, but I will say because it is a two-party consent state, I have to let everybody know that Project Spectrum, of course, is brought to you by Echelon, and Echelon is based in the state of Maryland. Because of that, you are going to be part of a recorded webinar. Even though your camera is going to be off and your microphone is going to be off, your name is going to be seen, it's going to be part of the transcript and so on and so forth. So if you have a problem being part of a recorded webinar, go ahead and jump off now. We promise that we will send you a link to the video once it is posted on our YouTube channel, but you have to make sure that you consent to be part of a recorded webinar in order to proceed from here. So I'm going to go ahead and give a few seconds for people to jump off because every now and then you get somebody who says, nope, I don't want to do that. And I'm going to take off for a little bit. But like I said, if you do have to jump off or that is a problem, we'll make sure that you get a link to the video. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you. Again, no matter where you're joining us in the country, whether it's afternoon, whether it's middle of the day, whether it's morning, whether it's middle of the night, because we've had some people who join us even internationally. I want to thank you again for joining us for this Cyber Circuits. Today, we're going with Cleared for Contracts, the 5 keys to unlocking CMMC compliance. And so I'm going to introduce our guest for today, Mr. Greg Summers. Greg is a cyber advisor here at Project Spectrum, but that is not the extent of his background. So Greg, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and what you did before you came on board.
For over 20 years, I worked in the contract world as a infrastructure engineer and administrator, jack of all trades and master of none.
Now I find that hard to believe, but now, Greg, you've been with Project Spectrum for how long?
I believe in November it'll be 3 years.
Fantastic. And in that time, I know that you've helped a lot of different companies that have registered for Project Spectrum when they're trying to get that ever important CMMC compliance. If you had to give it a round number, how many companies do you think you've helped over the 3 years you've been here?
We speak to a lot of people, and as some of my cohorts can attest to, there's a lot of tag teaming and triple teaming that we do. So probably well over 50 businesses.
And that's fantastic. And I have to say, the great thing about it is, and again, a lot of people don't realize just all of the resources that are available through Project Spectrum. And we're going to talk about those today because, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on is not only, it's kind of like that old commercial. Remember the guy who said, I'm not just the president of the company, I'm also a customer. It was the same thing with you, right? Before you came to Project Spectrum, you actually used Project Spectrum to help your company get CMMC compliant.
Correct. The company that I was working for at the time was looking to transition out of not just out of the federal space, but also transition into the defense industrial base. And as a matter of fact, I think it's part of the questions that you may ask later, but they were actually part of the MPP program. And because of that, then, had the, we had the privilege to work alongside Project Spectrum. And, I spoke to some amazing guys that were able to translate what I knew as an engineer from a technical perspective to translate some of the things that I was familiar with into compliance terms. And it's a small line of demarcation, but that leap was huge. So much so that after the journey was over, I joined the team.
No, and that's fantastic. And we will definitely talk about that because, uh, as I've told people on several other webinars, I also lead the strategic communications team for the nonprofit organization Move America. And Move America is the intermediary for the Mentor Protege program with DoD. And so obviously have a lot of experience with Mentor Protege program. And we will talk about that in just a little bit. But, I'd say, again, we're talking about 5 keys to unlocking CMMC compliance, and we're going to go through these one by one. I think the first one, obviously, is really understanding the compliance landscape. And the key theme that you need to understand there is know exactly what you're aiming for. So, looking back on your experience with your previous company, and then even looking at what some of the other companies that you've helped have been doing, what did your company know about CMMC and DFARS before you even started that compliance journey?
Um, they were pretty much on top of it from a perspective of understanding that CMMC would be needed and that at some point you would start seeing it in certain language in the RFPs and RFOs. So at that time, they had already kind of gone through a journey partially for CMMC Level 1. And so, it again, I was tasked to kind of finish the journey.
And when you talk about finishing the journey, because again, most companies that come into the defense industrial base, especially, when they're the less experienced companies, they really only ever have to reach CMMC level 1. But then you also have the ones that are going to aspire to eventually get to CMMC level 2. So, how do you help them differentiate you need level 1 versus you need level 2?
It's kind of how you do business now and forecasting for how you may want to do business in the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're seeing it, some of the companies here can attest to this, that you're starting to see these words, this acronym CMMC now in the language for some of the requests for proposals. So what's outlined in the contracts that you're aiming at is kind of key to where your journey begins or where it could begin. And then again, what you have to understand is the level of from an incremental perspective. It's not like leveling up in a video game, right? So we know CMMC has 3 levels, and I got to get to level 3 by all means necessary. If you're never going to be participating in that type of work, then that scope may be a little bit out. It may be out of scope for you. So what I had to do, and what I had to be open to being taught the importance of what these levels mean from a contractual perspective, and also the weight of what the lift is going to be as far as implementation on our side at that time when I was working for the company.
And then really, so we just had someone who popped a question in, and I think it's a really fair one. I think it's a really good one to think about. It's, how do you differentiate? So let's differentiate a little bit between CMMC level one, level two, and level three. So level one is really the foundational level, correct?
Correct. So, it's dealing with it's called federal contract information. So there are certain the mandate that the DFARS clause has, which is 252.204-7012, mandates that we maintain some adequate security measures around some of this information that as regards to the defense or Department of Defense. And okay, I see a question from Mike, and it's actually initially was 17 requirements, but it's actually 15 now. But you're not off by saying that. So level one has 15 requirements within those control families, which are what, 14? Whereas when you get to level two, you're talking about 110 security controls within those control families and over 300 assessment objectives, meaning things that correlate to actual implementation, whether it's actual implementation in your environment, in your IT infrastructure, or from a policy perspective. Over 300 assessment objectives that you have to uh, not only implement, but also be able to show some level of identification that you've done the work. And that's a lot, especially for our micro businesses where, you're the team of one. So we try to help businesses understand that from a landscape perspective. That way it doesn't feel overwhelming. And at the same time, it allows, as I mentioned before, a proper business forecasting. If you're a team of one, that's beautiful. That means your journey begins and you can start at level one, but at some point it gives you an idea of where to get to at the time that you want to get to level two. And again, you want to think about it not just from a financial money perspective. You want to look at it from what your a risk assessment about how much your business can handle, in addition to drumming up business if you already have business and satisfying the terms of your contract, but also the additional lift that would be created by participating in the CMMC program. So that's level two, which is considered advanced. Now, CMMC level three is considered as expert, and it adds another 24 requirements. So you go from 15 at level one to 110 at level two to 134 at level three. And as you start getting a little granular and getting into the weeds a little bit, uh, you have these control families that kind of help you understand where to implement some of these controls in your business.
And I went ahead and popped a slide up from one of our recent Project Spectrum webinars, where basically, again, to try to give somebody some visual representation, because there's a lot of stuff in here, and again, you're talking about level two. That's when you start going into controlled unclassified information. So CUI is something where, again, when you're going to be handling that, you've got to go to level two, and then the type of CUI that you handle will determine whether or not you can still do a self-assessment every 3 years, or whether you have to have a certified third-party assessment every 3 years. So again, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to CMMC, but that's really where the cyber advisors like you shine when it comes to helping businesses, right?
Well, Rick, you did that very good. I really feel like I should be interviewing you. But we're in the weeds all the time. I say this often, and the idea is that we stay there for a very specific reason, so that when we come out of that space and talk to businesses, we can kind of break down some of these difficult terms to kind of process in very simplified terms. That way it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Right, and that is the big thing because, again, you're talking, everybody hears CMMC, then you throw in NIST SP 800-171 and DFARS, and then you throw in SPURS, which is the supplier performance risk system where you have to put in your scores and, from the assessments. And so again, all of that can seem really overwhelming, but that really leads us well into the next area that we want to talk about, the second key, which is to make sure that you're leveraging external support and resources. Because the thing to realize is that you do not have to do it alone. So again, what I'm going to say is I'm going to go back to your journey when you were with your previous company. How was it that you engaged with Project Spectrum and the Mentor Protege program? Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
Oh, it was interesting. They basically had one person kind of managing some of the looking at some of the controls and trying to implement them. When I came on board, initially, I was kind of handling everything because it's a small business. But as we did some implementations and put some automations in place, I had some time to be able to now shift to CMMC and kind of looking at that and what that would look like for our business. And the concern of the company, as I'm sure some in the program have, is that it's kind of time specific, right? So they were toward the end of their relationship with the mentor protege program and wanted to try to get something in place for CMMC level 2 sooner as opposed to later. And so that's kind of my introduction. And then when we looked into that, they noticed that there were some things that they did not finish where CMMC level 1 was concerned. So I took them through both journeys, if that makes sense.
No, no, that makes absolute sense. And, somebody was just asking, so again, how do I know whether I am someone who has to self-attest or whether I'm someone who has to go through the third-party assessment? Again, this is an area where the cyber advisors at Project Spectrum really shine, right? Because again, these are questions that you get asked all the time. How do I know which level I need to be with CMMC? How do I know whether or not I have to, go out and hire a third-party assessor? And so that's something you've helped with in the past and
Correct.
continue to help with.
Correct. A lot of it does determine on what you're looking at in your RFP. Um, we try to future proof things. We would not we wouldn't have a company engage in that CMMC level 2 journey if it wasn't to prepare them for the actual audit. So the good thing about that is that if you get your RFP and it says that even though you're handling CUI, the level of CUI that you're handling by definition falls under where you could self-attest, then that's better for you, right? But understand this, that a lot of times these small businesses are going to be developing partnerships with a prime contractor. And the prime contractor, now that you've become part of their supply chain, may ask for certain details about what you're claiming as far as your, SPURS score and the things that you've implemented. And so you want to make sure that you are prepared no matter what the situation. Now, understand that there are only a small percentage of businesses that would even be looking at trying to uh, ascertain a CMMC level 3 certification. With that being said, if you have the abilities to be able to devote time to be able to do the implementation on, as well as work with us with the documentation, then we're definitely going to help you with that and put you on that path. But for us as cyber advisors, we always try to, you know, be one or two steps ahead. So, you know, in our, I guess our cadence and how we take companies through their journey, 9 times out of 10, when we're talking about CMMC level 2, we're talking about that as if it was you having to engage with a C3 PAO and then perform an audit. So we want you to be audit ready.
Right. And I think that's one of the things, again, that people need to understand about Project Spectrum is that the hands-on support and tools, we always call it the tools, the training, the resources that Project Spectrum provides, everything from the training courses to the micro videos where, again, we're explaining different parts of the scenario and the different parts of the process, the control families. All of that information is available at their fingertips, pretty much 24/7, 365. But then if there are more questions that they have, if they need more guidance, that again is when they could reach out to the cyber advisors. And so is that usually the way that it happens with you and the folks that you end up helping out? It's, they go through the resources that are self-taught and then they come to you with additional questions, or do they tend to come to you right at the beginning?
It's case by case, but a lot of times what happens is when they start going through the the education that they're monitoring themselves, they run into some things and some definitions and some explanations that they don't understand, and then that's when they have to engage us. And then again, the whole idea is that while it's an education on compliance and how CMMC relates to the standard, which is NIST, which is, the same standard that is mandated in the DFARS clause. We try to make that as simple as possible, but please understand that we make sure that there are no rose-colored glasses when we are kind of giving this information. That we try to, do it as free of. I guess I don't know how could I say that without straight with no chaser. Is that bad? Is that a bad way to say that?
No, I
But
don't think it is.
be very, very open and very transparent, because we represent Office of Small Business Programs. We have a certain level of accountability, and we ask businesses to charge us in that regard. Like, the cyber advisors, the team that I work on, they're very talented individuals, and it's not an easy thing to day in, day out look at compliance and some of the things that are kind of centered around that. And so I applaud my teammates, and that's basically the idea. You come here, and within the education, you get a very detailed explanation, but then it becomes a certain level of trying to um, hold you by the hand and guide you to get you through that journey, just kind of based on what your technical resources are, if that makes
No,
sense.
no, that makes perfect sense. And
Okay.
I think that leads us very well into the next key, into the third key of unlocking CMMC compliance, which really is creating that realistic compliance plan. Because you need to be real about this stuff. A key theme here is plan your work and work your plan. But I think, one of the more adept sayings, or one of the sayings that would really hit the nail on the head, is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. because you really do need to create that roadmap toward compliance, right?
Definitely. Um, you know, an SSP is a system security plan. So how do you build a system security plan beyond the scope of just kind of talking about what your IT infrastructure? How do you actually specify certain things that are needed in your system security plan? And then, you know, in the and then subsequently what you may not be able to get to or things that you have to plan out, then add those to the poems. Like, how do you get to that space? Well, when you go through the actual control families and go through the actual controls and start reading some of these things, it can be a little confusing, some of the language. But when you join with Project Spectrum, it increases your level of education as well as some of the things that were a little foreign to you. It just becomes like second nature. And I speak for myself personally that, you know, as an engineer, I understand security. Don't get me wrong. I understand even, granularly the things that have to be done on a firewall level. But I had no idea until I started looking at this stuff, some of the things that we had to wrap controls around. So because of that, um, it increased my awareness because my level of education about the CMMC program increased. So I tell everyone has a natural aversion to compliance because with compliance, it's synonymous with audit. And who wants to submit themselves to an audit, right? And as soon as we think of audit, we think about the three letters IRS. So, and the pain that can be associated with that. But imagine if you had someone working there that could actually kind of navigate some of the things that may be asked, then it wouldn't feel so arduous, right? So it's the same thing with this program. Uh, we have a lot of educational tools that are available on the website for people that their learning curve is a little smaller because they've been in the IT infrastructure world. So they kind of understand some of the language that's going on. But when you're talking about a small business and it might be um, a landscaping company for, that's doing landscaping work for the DoD, what if they don't have a person there that has an IT person? Then some of this language may be very difficult, even with the training, to navigate. And that's kind of where we come in. We kind of help with that lift. And again, it's not us in this world where we're, in this first iteration of CMMC and seeing what the potential is from a dollar value perspective. Project Spectrum doesn't sell snake oil. So, we are very direct about what your journey is going to be. We help you develop your SSP and your POAMs. We even create a road. When we say roadmap, this is how you're going to get through some of these steps. And once you start implementing some of these controls and start going through some of the documentation that's required, all that information gathering essentially does what? It compiles and comprises what your system security plan would be. And for a small business, you need that, right? Because you don't know when you were, thinking about these widgets that you were building, and all of a sudden now you're successful that you need an incident response team. What is that? What type of incidents are they responding to? You don't know anything about having, you know about business insurance, but do you know to include some other things as regards to protection where cyber insurance and the idea of ransomware and those types of things are concerned? So that's what we do. We help with that. So it's an educational process at the same time, a very straightforward business process where we help people uh, I would like to think be in a better space than before you met us. Like, no matter where you drop off in the journey, that, you are in a better place now, 2 months, 6 months, a year from when you first became introduced into Project Spectrum, or your first introduction of Project Spectrum.
And that, that always leads to the question, and I can't tell you how many of these webinars I've hosted. It's well into the dozens, if not getting into the triple figures over the years. But the one question that always came up, and it's the one that sort of makes me giggle a little bit, and I'm not giggling because I'm not trying to put anybody down, but it's just it's kind of like asking somebody what are the winning lottery numbers going to be tomorrow. There's nobody who's going to be able to tell you that. Everything always goes back to timeline. How long is this going to take? And I think what a lot of companies don't understand is the concept of you're going to get out of it what you're able to put into it.
So if you're a micro business of one, and you're the person that has to handle everything, it would be impossible for you to get through this program within 3 months. It's just not realistic. Again, we sell ideals here. We don't sell those dreams, and these are very attainable goals and ideals that we participate in. And you also have to look at it from a person coming in to look at your environment from an audit perspective. Uh, when an auditor comes and looks, they're concerned about the level of maturity of your program, right? So immediately, if you're saying you just did 110 security controls and over 300 assessment objectives in 2 months, they might give you the Lee Majors eyebrows when it comes to whether or not they're going to question some of the level of maturity of your program. But if you say it took us 12 months and these are the things that we accomplished and these are the things we plan to accomplish, then it's a different look, right? Because the whole idea is that you want to be able to justify this hard work that you've done. And please understand, everyone that's here on this thing, on this participate in this webinar, it's not easy. And it doesn't matter your level of intelligence, doesn't matter your level of skill, does not matter how many people you have in your IT team at present. It's going to be a lot of work. And what we're saying to you is that here at Project Spectrum, we are going to help you with that work, or at least help you uh, kind of build an outline for how to input some of those main points and subpoints. So
Exactly.
I guess that's a roundabout way of saying we usually say 2 years for CMMC level 2. We usually say anywhere from 12 to maybe 15 months, maybe 18 months for level 1, just depending on how many people you can devote to engaging not just the implementation, but the policy creation and the documentation that comes along with it.
And that's always the challenge because, especially like you said, when you're talking about the smaller companies, smaller size, smaller staff, and they're producing, and like you said, it could be the ones that are doing landscaping. If you want a landscaping business and suddenly you want to do landscaping for DoD, you can't just stop servicing your current customers in order to do everything that you need to do to become CMMC compliant. You have to juggle things. You have to balance all of that. And so that's really one of the ways that people have to look at it. Like I said, it's what you can put into it. It's what time you can devote to it. That's going to determine how long it's going to take. And I have told people dozens of times, cybersecurity isn't a destination. It's a journey, because just as you are getting compliant today, things may change tomorrow, tactics may change on the threat actors, and you're going to have to learn some more techniques, and you're going to have to change up the way you're doing things, right? The SSP and the POAM is not a document that you just write and then store in a file cabinet somewhere.
Correct. You over there preaching, Rick. I'm I second all of what you're saying, and that's what we talk about. We use the word journey a lot. And do you really want to be the business that missed what was going on during the journey because you kept saying, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? So you definitely don't want to have that approach when it comes to uh, involving yourself in the CMMC program. And again, to reiterate what you stated, the more you put in, you'll get out. Whatever you get out is what you put in.
And that's fantastic. And then I think that that leads us really well into the next key, our fourth key, which again is building that secure infrastructure, because security needs structure. And it's really all about taking the steps that you need. And there are process steps, there are procedure steps, there are technical steps that you need to secure your system. So can you share with the folks on the webinar and the folks who are going to be watching this video some of those steps that they're going to need to take as they go along this journey?
So the way I try to frame this is by helping people understand that CMMC is a bubble that is within your organization or your infrastructure. So at some point, one of the requirements is that you show a difference between what you do day to day, and the things that you handle as far as your FCI or CUI information. And so you would have to build an enclave within your infrastructure, and everything has to be separate, even from the cloud. If you're looking at it from an on-premise perspective, even the information on your network that traverses from the firewall through the routers all to the endpoints for CUI and FCI has to be different than what you do normally on a day to day. And as a matter of fact, some of the things you do day to day have to be shored up so that they meet a certain requirement as well. Additionally, when you said that it's a journey, it really represents what has to be done technically. You have to make sure that you monitor not just the things that you've implemented in the control sets, but in some way, shape, or form, try to monitor uh, with the filter of compliance. Meaning, if there's a way, if there's a tool that you can get that can actually look at your infrastructure or that enclave that you built and say, hey, the control for access control 3.3.4, 3.1.4, for example, is not being met. You need to do steps A, B, and C in order to get you back into a state of readiness and a state of compliance. Those things have to be monitored constantly, continuously, in order to satisfy the requirements in the program. And you have to understand what that means from an endpoint perspective, the things that may be on your laptops, as well as the resources that may be shared, whether it's storage on-prem or in the cloud. Those things have to be separate.
And it really is recognizing that you're not just protecting systems. You're not just protecting devices. You're protecting people. And I think, again, that's one of the messages that we always try to evangelize to folks when we're talking about CMMC compliance, because it's a lot of hoops to jump through. But at the end of the day, when you become part of the defense industrial base, you immediately have a target on your back from all of these threat actors. They want to get at you for anything from your intellectual property to your interconnectivity with the larger contractors, to your interconnectivity with government systems. And so it's always about you're jumping through these hoops for a reason because you need to protect your data and you need to protect your system, but you're also protecting your people because going back to your former business, what would happen to that company if you had gotten hacked?
Well, because I kept them anonymous, they actually, before I got there, were the victims of a ransomware attack and spent tens of thousands of dollars. They didn't pay the ransom, but they spent a lot of money to be able to clean and get rid of their systems and change systems. And it was a lot of work for them. And can you imagine now what that will do to your insurance rates? Your insurance rates are going to go up. As a matter of fact, the insurance company is probably going to do penetration testing on your system to verify that they can, you know, uh, allow you to be insured. It creates a lot of different problems if you don't think about it. And what it boils down to, one word, is just accountability. In this particular forum, in this particular business, as you mentioned, there are a lot of things to consider. So you cannot take the position that I didn't know, or I wasn't aware that I needed this, or that I had to have these types of things in place. You just don't have that. You don't have that luxury. So it requires a lot of education again, but it more importantly, you just got to be accountable. And that's where, when you're having conversations, particularly with cyber advisors, it becomes more of an interchange. I know initially I treated, it's so funny, one of the advisors, we work together every day now. And I told him there were sometimes I ducked those calls because it felt like they was given, like they were performing an audit, and it was terrible. But once the other cyber advisor helped me to appreciate what the level of accountability is, it changed my whole outlook on all of it. I don't think I would be here if I didn't have that heart to heart conversation. And those are the types of things that we recognize that there are people on the other side, people that have families, people that are caregivers. And if something happens where their business is hampered by a threat actor or things like that, then they can't take care of the people that they love. So, did you ever think that you would uh, put put CMMC and love together? No, of course not. But we're thinking that far ahead, like the amount of stress that would cause, and you would probably have a lot of gray hairs in your beard like this if something unfortunate happened and you had to deal with a threat actor, or had to pay ransom because they locked up your systems. It's just a lot. So, it's best to put yourself through the paces, understand that it's not going to be easy, but that you do have help, and you have help that is um, people that are charged themselves with a certain level of accountability. So we're not just giving any type of information out. We always make sure that the things that we say line up with what the DoD CIO says. We try to make sure that, you know, if there are changes, if Cyber AB has some things to put out, they're the accreditation body. What they say matters. So we care about the things that they care about. All of those things you get when you actually engage with a cyber advisor. We're like we're like the cybersecurity compliance monks of Project Spectrum, where we're kind of, in the catacombs looking at the scrolls and trying to make heads or tails of things. But honestly speaking, it's something you need people like that, people that have a certain level, a higher level of accountability for themselves to be able to help you in this journey so that, you're not the weak link in any supply chain.
Right. And then, the interesting thing is the way that you put it, when you were on the other side, you said, I'm ducking the calls because it almost felt like I was being audited. And that's something that you really need to be ready for. And that is our fifth key. So, perfect segue.
Yep.
You've got to stay audit ready, which means you have to document everything because proof is everything. And like you said before, I didn't know or I didn't realize it's not an acceptable reason at this stage. So the documentation is going to play a huge role in reaching CMMC compliance. Talk to us a little bit about all of the things that a company that is even level 1 is going to need to document on a regular basis.
You're talking about 15 controls in which if you don't have if you have no idea of what this is going to change how you even look at your business. So all of these things, the policies of how you do things in your company have to be documented. The policies about how you maintain uh, your media and things along those lines have to be documented. The things that you've done to protect yourself, all of these things have to be documented because it's the actual documentation of those things that when we put it all together and mash it up, it becomes an SSP and subsequently POAMs. And the thing is this, that old saying, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Um, you really need to apply that thought process when it comes to this CMMC journey. That it's never an off day. It's never a take a vacation from this compliance journey. And if you've ever, from an IT perspective, ever looked at some of the stuff that comes in some of the appliances for intrusion detection, and you see like the hundreds of IP addresses that are trying to flood your network in order to try to get access to information. And it's not that they necessarily want you, but they may want to get to your prime contractor and then subsequently get to the agency that you're working with. So it's something that you have to think about on a daily basis. The good thing about that is that it kind of generates um, things how you do in business. It changes how you look at things. It changes how you forecast in the years to come. And the thing is that I say it's so important that you go through. Nobody likes documentation, and if you say you do, I'm gonna put a lie detector on you and really ask you. But it's so necessary. It's so necessary. What is an auditor gonna look at? It's just gonna take your word for it. Yeah, I trust that you shored your firewall up. Not only do you need to tell them how you did it, you got to have some technical explanation about what you used in order to put that in place. You have to have some policy wrapped around that. And then you got to have a snapshot. You got to have a picture to say, look, this is what I did, and this is how I captured the information. So the documentation is actually bigger than the implementation. And again, we're not saying that to scare anybody, but it's to prepare you for what's ahead and at the same time understand what you get when you engage with Project Spectrum. You get a lot of assistance when it comes to those types of things that people are very you know closed off when it comes to that type of assistance. Even when it comes to paying for things, it they're very closed off about it. Like, you literally have to engage with someone on a sales team in order to have that information, but to be able to be participate in a program that is sponsored by the DoD, and then be able to talk to someone who looks at this compliance model on a daily basis and look at it with a fine-tooth comb, that it's worth its weight in gold, literally.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And again, high risk equals high reward. And I think that's one of the big things that we try to preach is that yes, you're going to go through a lot in order to get to this point, in order to get CMMC compliance, but the reward of being CMMC compliant, not just with the contractual opportunities that are going to suddenly open up for you, but just knowing from your own standpoint that your business is cyber secure and that your cybersecurity hygiene is much improved so that you're protecting your business, you're protecting your people, you're protecting your intellectual property. I mean, all of that is definitely rewarding.
Definitely. And it changes how you look at your own business, right? Sometimes you're doing working on things, these ideas that you have that are different than everybody else's, those ideas need to be protected. There is a story about somebody who found a business proposal that was left literally on public transportation, and that person was able to use that, and they became a billionaire from that. So being very protected, or having this mindset that your thoughts mean something, and that these things that you're putting in place in business, even the way you do things is different than anybody else, because it's unique to you. So those things should be protected. And when you do it and you look at it from that perspective, then it really changes again how it changes your business processes, to be perfectly honest. So I charge everybody with getting in the journey, and really submitting yourself to it, and looking at it as a turtle race as opposed to you know a rabbit race.
Yep, slow and steady wins. We always say that. Um, So as we start to head up to the top of the hour, the Project Spectrum team has been online answering some questions, but I think there are a couple that I'd love to just sort of get your take on, if you're okay with that.
Okay,
All right.
sure.
So first one, what is the typical amount of time the clients you serve spend to prepare for a level 2 certification engagement with a C3 PAO?
Even that varies, because what we know about an audit process is this, right? They come and they look at everything, then they go deliberate, and then they tell you what their findings are. Now, based on their findings, that could be a lot of work for you, right? But for us, we try to mitigate that, and I think we've been very successful in mitigating what happens when the C3 PAOs come back with their findings. And I don't want to put a time frame on that, because this is being recorded, and I don't want you to say I didn't get my certification because of something Greg Summers said, and then I got to watch over my kids. But again, try not. I know your business kind of demands that, but try not to put so much emphasis on time, because in this particular program, quality matters. Please understand that.
Yeah, it really is one of those scenarios where you'd rather do it right than do it quickly.
Definitely.
Another question, and this is an interesting one because again, this would be more like an opinion, although they're
Okay.
asking for a prediction. But it sounds like the requirement for CMMC level 1 or 2 is dependent on the contracts that companies are bidding for or the relationship that they have with the prime. What is your prediction of the future of DIB business? Will most future contracts require level 1 only or level 2?
All of that is going to be predicated on what the agency or the prime um, is charged with as far as the program that's related to the contract. Meaning, it may be CUI. So if that's the case and you're working on that, then you kind of know what your what your journey is going to look like. I think as we get as we get further along in the program and we get more clear definitions on certain things, I think a lot of businesses are going to be trying their best to try to get to level 2 to try to get some of that business because you know it's just going to be a higher contract value. But there still has to be certain types of business that DoD conducts that don't require that much security around your infrastructure. But again, you want to be looking at this from a forecasting perspective. You definitely, once you get your hands or the idea wrapped around what is necessary for CMMC level 1, you definitely want to start looking at level 2. You want to put this in your projections in terms of uh, what's next for you in the next 6 months or a year or 2 years down the road. That's going to generate what? You're going to be looking at the types of people that you start bringing into your company, right? You want individuals that have a same type of understanding or seriousness when it comes to compliance because the compliance protects everyone. It protects the contractor, the people that's actually going to be paying you these checks, protects you, and then it protects anybody that's in the middle of that sandwich. So my prediction is that things as threat actors get a little more intelligent, maybe level 1 requirements may get a little more stringent. So, but again, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So, let that be your mantra in your forecasting and your in terms of how you're looking at your risk assessments. And then that way, even if there's some adjustments that have to be made from a technical perspective, you're not so far down on the curve that it's going to take a significant amount of time to be ready.
Excellent. And then I'm gonna throw one more at you because again we want to be respectful of everybody's time. But
Yes,
I
sir.
think this is a really good one because and we've heard this question a lot come up in the webinars as well. When working with potential subcontractors, is there a way to determine that they are CMMC compliant other than just taking their word for it?
Yes, that's kind of what the program is about, right? So Cyber AB is a whole accreditation body, right? That is kind of built around making sure that these things are in place. So a lot of that, again, we talked about how important your documentation is. Nobody is going to take your word for it. Even if you're level 1, even if, and especially if you're a subcontractor, please count on your prime contractor asking for certain documentation that pertains to your self-attest CMMC level 1, and then you be able to produce that documentation. Again, it's being accountable. If you said you did it, you should be doing it. And again, it serves as a method of protection. Um, think about doing all that you can to satisfy the requirement and not the bare minimum. Again, trust me, threat actors are very intelligent people, very intelligent, and that's why they, they do what they do, and it's very nefarious, and it's the reason why we're on this call, right? More or less. So please understand that they're not going to just take vacations, to kind of make things easier for you. You have to kind of try to stay ahead of them as much as humanly possible. And this program allows you to do that. And then again, whatever you thought your business model was, or whatever you thought your baseline was, when you start getting into some of the requirements for CMMC, it's going to expand what your foundation is, because then you will actually be ready for work that you didn't even know you were ready for when you start looking at some of these RFPs. Just the natural maturation of being a part of this program will actually help increase your business as far as being able to submit RFPs, as well as being able to be available for certain things that a year before or 2 years before, from a corporate perspective, you weren't ready for. So, it's just something to keep in mind.
And one of the big things that we always like to remind people is that Project Spectrum, again, gives you that dashboard, gives you that compliance dashboard, that as you're going through the program and as you're going through, and you start with that self-assessment, that gives you your baseline, and then you continue to build off of that, because you need to see where it is that you need to go in order to get where you want to be. And you start to see that number creep up, and you start to see that spur score that is starting to increase. I mean, that's really where you could get something like that. So if somebody is telling you that they're CMMC compliant, one of the easiest things to do would be have them go to Project Spectrum and do that self-assessment, and let's see what that score is. And for level one, it's a self-attestation, but you've got to have the documentation behind it. It's not just, oh yeah, I'm CMMC compliant, thank you very much. It's all the documentation behind it, and seeing that score, and then understanding that is going to lead to where you need it to lead.
Definitely. This is a space where why is always a good question to have. So from a business perspective, and you may want to ask yourselves why this? Why this many controls? Why are they asking me to protect this? And then doing a little bit of research into that why. Um, there will be a connection point. Everybody has a connection thread with CMMC, because as it pertains to your business, and I can't determine what that is for you, but I promise you, if you submit yourself to the process, you won't be disappointed with the result. You'll be more educated in terms of a technical perspective about security. The posture of your business's cybersecurity will improve, as well as it'll improve the state of business that you're doing, and increase your reach as far as being able to obtain other business.
Fantastic. Well, we are a few minutes over, so we thank everyone for sticking with us, because I think this is such an important topic, and hopefully people found the information very worthwhile. Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to talk about this, and really look forward to the folks who are going to reach out to you and the rest of the Project Spectrum team to get your help as they're going forward on their CMMC compliance journey.
Thank you, Rick, and look forward to more interesting and amazing conversations with some of the businesses out there, finding out the cool things you're doing and seeing where Project Spectrum can assist you in your journey.
Yep. And so all you need to do, go to projectspectrum.io, make sure you are registered. It does not cost anything to register. You get a whole host of tools, training, and information that you can utilize. And that's, again, when you can then open up that access to our cyber advisors like Greg. So, Greg, thanks again. It was great having you. And I look forward to having you on a future one. Hopefully, the experience was good enough for you.
Always a fun time with you, Rick. So thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. And remember, go to projectspectrum.io, get yourself registered, get yourself into that compliance journey, and we wish you the best of success. Thanks so much for joining us today, and look for our next webinars. Keep an eye on that calendar on our website, and keep an eye out for the emails that we send out. But I want to say thanks again to Greg. I want to say thanks to Gus and Mark and Richard and Rob and the entire Project Spectrum team that joined us. If I forgot anybody else, I'm sorry, but those are the only names I saw. But again, thanks to everybody for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time to join us for the Cyber Circuits webinar. We look forward to our next future webinars and hope you'll join us then. And we wish you the best of success on your cybersecurity compliance journey. Have a fantastic day.